Before we begin, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has stayed with this story from the very beginning. If you've watched part 1 and part 2 and you're here for the final chapter, then you're not just a viewer, you are a true story lover. You're the kind of person who doesn't just start a journey, you stay until the very end to see how it unfolds. And that means a lot. If you're new here, please don't make the mistake of starting with part 3. A great story is like a cake. You wouldn't enjoy only the last slice and miss everything that made it special. Go back and watch part 1 and part 2 first, then come back. Trust me, the ending will mean so much more when you've experienced the entire journey. And if you've been enjoying stories like this, consider subscribing. This trilogy is only a small taste of the powerful, emotional, and unforgettable stories waiting for you on this channel. There are many more journeys ahead, and I'd love for you to be part of them. Now, thank you for being here. Let's experience the final chapter together. She found out about the article the same way she found out about everything that mattered in this story. Not from the person who should have told her first, from a newspaper. Except this time, it wasn't a Lagos newspaper delivering someone else's secret. This time, it was a Korean business journalist. 29 years old, ambitious, already celebrated for the kind of long-form investigative work that won awards and destroyed reputations with equal efficiency, who had spent 14 months building a 12,000-word profile that was scheduled to hit the cover of Kang Business Review, Korea's most influential financial magazine, in exactly 11 days. The journalist's name was Park Ji-soo. The article's working title, which had been leaked to 3 competing outlets by the time it reached Adaeze's desk, was The Foreign Acquisition, How Adaeze Okonkwo Turned a Love Story into a Corporate Takeover. Adaeze read the leaked summary once. She set it down. She looked out the window of the Seoul apartment at the city that had never fully accepted her and had long since stopped mattering because of it. And then she looked at the clock, because 11 days was not much time, and she had a great deal to do. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, because before the article, before the 11 days, before the final battle of a war that had been running for 25 years, there was an essay, 8 pages long, written in 3 languages, by an 8-year-old girl who had not told either of her parents she was writing it. Kang Min-ho found out about Ji-ada's essay the way most fathers find out their children have done something world-altering, not from the child and not from his wife, but from his personal assistant, who placed a printed document on his desk on a Thursday morning in September with the expression of someone who is not entirely sure how to categorize what she is holding. Adaeze's school submitted this to the National Youth Writing Competition 6 weeks ago, she said. It won. First place, all categories, all ages. She paused. The anthology is being distributed to every school in South Korea next week. 40,000 copies. Minho looked at the document. The title, printed in 3 languages, Korean, Yoruba, and English, read, 나이 엄마는 모든 곳에서 왔어요. 이아미와 니 이비키비, My Mother is from Everywhere, by Ji-ada Kang Okonkwo, age 8. He read the first line. My mother was born in a city where the air smells like rain and red earth, and she taught herself to walk into rooms that were not built for her until the rooms had no choice but to change their shape. He put the document down. He picked it up again. He read all 8 pages without stopping, without moving, without making a single sound. When he finished, he sat in his car outside Ji-ada's school for 22 minutes. Not because he was composing himself, because he had come apart so completely that composure was not yet available. The essay was, in 8 pages, the most accurate account of 25 years of a love story that he had ever read. It was written with the specific, terrifying clarity of a child who had been paying attention every day since she first opened her eyes and decided the world was worth watching closely. Ji-ada had written about the ballroom. She had written about the morning she found her mother reading a Lagos newspaper, with both hands pressed flat on top of it. She had written about sitting on Su Yan's lap at the dinner table and deciding, before anyone had told her she was allowed, that this was her sister. She had written about watching her father read medical textbooks with reading glasses he tried to hide. She had written about her grandmother sitting in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours and 19 minutes without moving. She had written about standing in the Lagos apartment garden one morning and watching her mother look at the Atlantic Ocean the way other people look at home. My mother, she had written near the end, is from everywhere. She is from the city where the air smells like earth, and from the city where the lights never stop. She is from a language that sounds like water, and a language that sounds like wind, and a language that is still being made from the space between. She is from the room she was not invited to, and from the room she built, and from every door that was closed to her that she made into a window. My mother is from everywhere, and everywhere, because of her, is bigger. He called Adaeze. She picked up on the second ring. "Did you know?" he said. His voice was not entirely level, a beat of silence. "She showed me the first draft 4 months ago," Adaeze said. "She asked me not to tell you. She wanted it to be a surprise." "Ada." He stopped, started again. "She wrote the part about the ballroom. She described your face. She said—" He could not finish the sentence. "I know what she said," Adaeze said softly. "How did she know what your face looked like? She was 3. "She has been watching my face every day since," Adaeze said. "She watches everything. She has always watched everything. You know this about her." The silence stretched and held. She said, Minho tried again. She said the bravest thing she has ever seen was not in a movie or a book. She said it was her mother's face in that ballroom. She said it looked like someone who had decided, Minho, Adaeze said, like someone who had decided the world was going to have to make room. The silence that followed lasted a long time, and then Adaeze Okonkwo-Kong, who had survived everything this story had thrown at her for 25 years, made a sound, small, private, unguarded, the sound of something being received after a very long wait by someone who had almost stopped believing it would come. "Come home," she said. "I'm already on my way," he said. He started the car. He did not know, as he drove, that in 26 days he would be sitting in a different kind of office, not his own, hearing information that would test every lesson this story had tried to teach him. He did not know that an article was already being written, that a source was already talking, that someone inside the world he had built was, at this very moment, feeding 14 months of carefully curated damage to a 29-year-old journalist who believed, genuinely, that she was telling the truth. He did not know any of it. He drove home. He held his daughter for a long time when he got there. Ada, pressed against his chest, said, "Did you like it, Papa?" "It is the best thing I have ever read," he said. Ada considered this with the gravity it deserved. "Better than your acquisition reports?" she said. "Immeasurably," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and asked if there was rice for dinner. The cardiac unit at Samsung Medical Center's executive health floor had cream walls and indirect lighting, and the specific quiet of expensive rooms where difficult things are said in manageable tones. Minho had been here 4 times. The first time, a routine screening. The second, a follow-up. The third, a specialist consultation. The fourth, today, 26 days after sitting in the car outside Ada's school, for the results of the London cardiologist's assessment. Dr. Yu opened the file on the screen between them. "The good news," he said with the careful tonality of a man who has delivered difficult information to powerful people for 2 decades, is that this is entirely manageable. We caught it at a stage where intervention is highly effective." "The intervention," Minho said. "Surgery. You have a window of approximately 3 months before the risk profile changes significantly. Recovery is 8 to 12 weeks, restricted activity throughout." A pause. "The risk of not treating is significant. The condition will progress. The timeline is uncertain, but the direction is not. Minho looked at the scan on the screen. The human heart, it turned out, looked exactly like what it was. A muscle that had been working very hard for a very long time. "I need time to manage some things before this becomes known," he said. Dr. Yu looked at him. "How much time?" "A few weeks." "Minho." The doctor used his name, not his title, a deliberate signal. "Tell your wife." "I will," he said, "when the time is right." The doctor did not look convinced. He was correct not to be. The same man who had proposed on a ballroom floor, who had read pregnancy medical textbooks at midnight, who had walked into a boardroom and watched his wife sit in the chair to his left and felt the full weight of everything he had taken 3 years too long to give her. That man went home that evening, looked at Adaeze across the dinner table, listened to Ada describe an argument she'd had with a classmate about the correct pronunciation of a Yoruba word, and said nothing. He told himself the same things he had always told himself, that he was protecting her, that she had already carried so much, that the right time was coming. He told his personal assistant on day 3. He told his lead lawyer on day 7 because the succession documents needed updating. He did not tell Adaeze. He did not tell Giada. He told himself each morning that today was not the right day. Today was never the right day. What today was, on the 27th morning, was a Tuesday when Ada came home from school, climbed onto the kitchen counter stool, accepted a piece of cut mango from her mother, and said, with the casual, total devastation of a child who does not know what she is detonating, "Mama, is Papa going to be okay after his operation?" The kitchen went completely still. Adaeze's hand stopped moving. She looked at her daughter. "What operation, baby?" Her voice was perfectly level. "The one Papa has been talking to Dr. Yu about," Giada said, entirely unbothered, reaching for another piece of mango. "I heard them on the phone last week. Papa said it was nothing to worry about, but he sounded like he sounds when he says something isn't important. But it is." "You're right," Adaeze said very quietly. "He does have a particular voice for that." "It's the same voice he used when he said the Lagos flight delay was fine," Giada offered helpfully. Adaeze set the knife down. "Go do your homework, sweetheart." Giada slid off the stool and disappeared down the hall with the complete unbothered efficiency of a child who has successfully delivered critical intelligence and considers her work done. Adaeze stood at the counter alone. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked. It was not the first time she had stood in a kitchen counting seconds in controlled silence while a man she loved kept something from her. It was, she decided, absolutely going to be the last. Minho came home at 7. She was sitting at the counter. No phone, no book, no pretense of anything other than waiting. He saw her face from the doorway. He set his briefcase down. He poured 2 glasses of water, the 25-year ritual, and sat across from her. "Giada asked me," Adaeze said, "if you were going to be okay after your operation." Silence. "How long?" she said. 27 days. The number landed in the kitchen like something dropped from a very great height. She looked at him for a long time. "I have had this conversation with you," she said, "in a ballroom, in a boardroom, in this kitchen before. I have told you who I am and what I need and what it costs me every time you decide. Out of love, I know it is out of love, that has never been the question, to make decisions about my life in a room I am not in." Her voice was completely steady. "And you have learned it. I have watched you learn it. So I need you to tell me, what happened? What made you go back?" He was quiet for a moment. "I was afraid," he said. She waited. "Not of the surgery," he said. "The surgery I can manage. I've managed worse." He looked at his hands. "I was afraid of the look on your face when I told you. The same look you had when you read about Su Yan in that Lagos newspaper. The look you get when I've handed you something heavy that you then carry perfectly because you cannot do otherwise. I could not..." He stopped, started again. I am 69 years old, Ada. I have been the most feared man in Korean business for 20 years. I have never once, in all of that, felt fear the way I feel it when I imagine putting something painful in front of you and watching you absorb it. The kitchen was very still. That, she said softly, is the most loving reason you have ever had for doing the wrong thing. Something in his face broke open slightly. I know, he said. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning, the diagnosis, the surgical plan, the recovery timeline, all of it, every detail, tonight. So he did. He told her everything, and she listened, without flinching, without performing strength, with the complete focused attention of a woman who has spent 25 years learning to receive difficult truth without letting it destroy her before she has had time to think. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. We are confirming the surgery this week, she said. I will be at every appointment. I will speak to Dr. Yu myself. I will review every plan in the room where it is discussed. She held his gaze. Agreed? Agreed, he said immediately. She picked up her water glass. And Minho. Her voice shifted, not softer, but deeper, more honest. The voice she used when she was allowing herself to need something. I am frightened. I am telling you that directly because we are done keeping the frightening things in separate rooms. I need you to be frightened with me. Not brave, not managed. With me. He reached across the counter. She placed her hand in his. I'm frightened too, he said. The kitchen held them, and outside, indifferent and glittering and completely unaware that anything significant was happening in this apartment, the city that had never fully loved them both went on doing what cities do. Neither of them noticed. They were holding hands. The leak arrived in Adaeze's inbox on a Monday morning, forwarded by Dong-hyun with a single line of text. You need to see this today. Call me when you have. She called him immediately. Park Ji-soo, Dong-hyun said. 29 years old, already won 2 National Journalism Awards. She's been working on this piece for 14 months, 32 named sources. The angle, he paused, the angle is that the romantic narrative around you and Minho was constructed, that the pregnancy announcement, the boardroom entrance, the Mauritius acquisition, that all of it was a long-game strategy by a foreign national to acquire controlling influence over a Korean corporate institution. Adaeze was quiet. The tone, she said? Measured, Dong-hyun said, which makes it more dangerous than hostile. It does not call you a villain. It presents you as a strategist, a brilliant one. It frames your intelligence and your capability, the very things that should be celebrated, as evidence of calculation. It takes every true thing about you and reframes it as suspicious. Publication date? 11 days. Kang Business Review cover. Print and digital simultaneously. A pause. Ada, there is something else. Tell me. The 32 sources. I have been able to identify 16 of them through the language patterns in the leaked summary. He paused. 15 of them are what you would expect. Former board members, Shin family associates, social contacts of Madame Yoon's from the old guard, people who have always been hostile. And the 16th? Adaeze said. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. The 16th source, Dong-hyun said, is someone who has had access to internal Kong family documents, private correspondence, and the specific financial architecture of the Mauritius acquisition. Another pause. The level of detail in this source's contributions to the article could only come from someone inside the family's inner circle, someone who has been trusted with information that was never meant to leave the room. Adaeze sat very still. Who? She said. I don't know yet, he said, but I will. Give me 48 hours. She hung up. She sat at the Seoul apartment window for a long time. 11 days. Minho's surgery was in 9 days. The timing was not an accident. Whoever had done this had chosen this window precisely. The window when Minho would be in a hospital, when Adaeze would be managing his recovery, when the family would be at its most distracted and its most vulnerable. This was not opportunism. This was a plan, and it had been running, quietly and invisibly, inside her own world for 14 months. She did not tell Minho, not because she was keeping a secret from him. She was done with the architecture of that particular mistake, but because the surgery was in 9 days and she was not going to put this in front of him before he went under anesthetic, she would handle the first phase herself. She would tell him when he was on the other side. She called Chisholm. Chisholm arrived in Seoul 30 hours later. She called Soo-yeon. Soo-yeon arrived from Osaka in 24 hours. The three women sat at the Seoul apartment dining table on a Tuesday evening. Giada asleep down the hall, the city quiet outside, 2 laptops open between them. And they began. 48 hours, Chisholm said, looking at Dong-hyun's preliminary analysis. That's how long before we know who the source is. Between now and then, what do we know? We know the article's angle, Adaeze said. We know the sources they are using. We know the publication date. We know the timing is deliberate, designed to land while Minho is in surgery and I am managing his recovery. So whoever did this, Soo-yeon said, knows Minho's surgical schedule. The table went quiet. The surgical schedule had been shared with exactly 7 people. Dr. Yu, Minho's personal assistant, his lead lawyer, Chisholm, Jae-won, and Madam Yoon. All 3 women looked at each other across the table. Nobody said the name. Nobody needed to. Dong-hyun called at 6 a.m. on Thursday. I have the source, he said. Adaeze was already awake. She had been awake since 4. Tell me, she said. A long pause. Ada. His voice was very careful. I need you to hear this and not... Tell me, she said again. He told her. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long time after he finished. The source was not Madam Yoon. The source was Jae-won's wife. Lee Min-ji, Jae-won's wife of 3 years, the daughter of the Shin family patriarch, the woman who had watched Adaeze walk into that boardroom and take her family's leverage apart with 31% and a leather folder, had been feeding information to Park Ji-soo for 14 months. Not the Shin family officially, Min-ji personally. Acting, it appeared, without her husband's knowledge, on a private grievance that had been building since the day Adaeze sat down in the empty chair and said, "Shall we begin?" And the Shin family's carefully constructed position in the Kong Empire began its slow, irreversible collapse. She had used her access as a member of the family to copy private documents. She had used her position at family gatherings to extract information from conversations she was trusted to be part of. She had used, and this was the detail that landed hardest, she had used a personal relationship with Minho's personal assistant to access the surgical schedule. 14 months, inside their world, inside the family table. Adaeze thought about all the dinners, all the occasions, all the moments she had been generous. Deliberately, strategically generous, the way she had been generous with Soo-yeon, the way she had been generous in that boardroom, toward the Shin family connection. She had been generous, and someone had taken that generosity into a room with a journalist and used it as ammunition. She sat with this for exactly as long as she needed to sit with it. Then she called Chisholm. "It's Min-ji," she said. A silence. "Jae-won doesn't know," Adaeze said. "I'm certain of that. He needs to hear this from someone who won't weaponize it against him. He needs to hear it before the article publishes." "That's a conversation for Minho to have," Chisholm said carefully. "Minho goes into surgery in 6 days," Adaeze said. "He will not have this conversation before the surgery. I will tell him after, when he is stable." She paused. "Which means someone else handles Jae-won." "Who?" Adaeze was quiet for a moment. "Madam Yoon," she said. She drove to the family compound herself. Madam Yoon was in the garden. The stone path garden where Soo-yeon had confronted her 2 years ago, where Giada had sat beside her on the steps and asked why she was sad. The old woman was in her morning routine, unhurried and impeccable, the way she always was. She looked up when Adaeze came through the gate. She knew immediately that something had happened. After 25 years of reading each other, they both knew immediately. It was perhaps the strangest gift of their complicated history. The ability to see each other with absolute clarity, stripped of performance. Adaeze sat down on the stone bench across from her. She told her everything. Madame Yoon listened without interrupting. Her face did the thing it had learned to do in the past 2 years, received difficult information without the old architecture of control, not blank, present. When Adaeze finished, Madame Yoon was quiet for a long time. "Minji," she said, "just the name, the way you say the name of something you should have seen coming." "Yes," Adaeze said. "I brought that family into this house," Madame Yoon said. The words came out flat and final, the way a verdict sounds when the judge has already made peace with it. "The Shin connection was my arrangement, my strategy. I brought them to the table and I gave them proximity and access, and I—" She stopped. "You didn't know what Minji would do," Adaeze said. "No," Madame Yoon said, "but I created the conditions." She looked at Adaeze directly. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to tell Jae-won," Adaeze said, "before the article publishes, before he reads it somewhere else. He deserves to hear it from someone who loves him and will not use it to destroy his marriage if it can be saved." Madame Yoon looked at her for a moment. "You are asking me to protect my son's marriage," she said, "to the woman who spent 14 months trying to destroy you. I am asking you to give Jae-won the chance to make his own choices with the full truth in front of him," Adaeze said. "What he chooses after that is his, but he deserves the truth first." The garden held them. "You are a more generous person than I deserve to know," Madame Yoon said quietly. "You're learning," Adaeze said. "So am I." Minho went into surgery on a Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Adaeze was there. Chisum was there. Ada was there, sitting in the waiting room with the focused gravity of a child who understands that some situations require stillness, holding a small notebook in her lap that she had brought without explanation. Soo-yeon was there, having flown in from Osaka 3 days before. Madame Yoon was there, in the corner chair she had taken very early and would not leave. Jae-won was there. He had arrived alone. His wife was not with him. He had come in the early morning before most of the family and sat beside Madame Yoon without speaking. His face held the specific weight of a man who has been told something enormous and is still deciding how to carry it. He looked at Adaeze when she arrived. She looked back at him. He stood up. "I am sorry," he said. 3 words. Plain and direct, the way true apologies are. Without decoration, without the architecture of explanation, just the fact of them. For what was done, for the access that was given, for all of it. Adaeze held his gaze. "You didn't do it," she said. "It was done in proximity to my name," he said. "That is not nothing." She nodded slowly. "No," she said, "it isn't." She paused. "How are you?" He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite the opposite. "Complicated," he said. "Yes," she said. "I imagine so." They sat in the same waiting room for 4 hours and 23 minutes. The surgery went well. Dr. Yu said those words, "It went well." And Ada dropped her notebook and crossed the room at full running speed and pressed herself into Adaze's side with every ounce of her small body. Adaeze held her daughter. She looked over Ada's head at the room around her, at Chisum exhaling, at Soo-yeon pressing her hand over her mouth, at Jae-won closing his eyes briefly, at Madame Yoon at the back of the room, sitting with her hands folded and her eyes closed, and her lips moving around something private, and possibly for the first time in 86 years, resembling a prayer. And she felt, beneath the relief, beneath the exhaustion, beneath everything, the specific and irreplaceable sensation of being exactly where she was supposed to be, surrounded by exactly the people she was supposed to be surrounded by, not the people she was born to, the people she chose, and the people who had, imperfectly and eventually, and some of them, after a very long journey, chosen her back. She held Adaeze tighter. Outside the hospital, Sol continued. Inside, a family held its breath and then let it go. The article was publishing in 6 days. Minho was in recovery, sedated, the surgical team satisfied, and Chisholm monitoring every reading with the focused intensity of a woman who has reviewed the medical literature and is not leaving anything to chance. Adaeze had 6 days. She told Minho on the 2nd day of recovery, when he was conscious and stable, and the worst of the post-surgical fog had lifted. She told him everything, the article, the angle, the source, Minji, all of it, in the calm, direct, unsparing way that she had promised herself she would always tell him difficult things. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, his jaw was very tight. "Minji," he said. "Yes." J1. "Knows, Madame Yoon told him. He was at the hospital." A silence. "What are you going to do?" he said. She looked at him. "I'm going to respond," she said. "With lawyers? An injunction?" "No," she said. "Not with lawyers." He looked at her for a long moment. The expression on his face moved through several things. Concern, calculation, and then, slowly, something that was simply trust. The trust of a man who has watched this woman walk into enough rooms to understand that she knows, always, exactly what she is doing. "Tell me," he said. "I'm going to write," she said. She started writing on the 3rd day of his recovery. Not a press statement, not a legal rebuttal, not a managed corporate communication with language approved by 6 lawyers and drained of everything that made it true. She wrote the way Adaeze wrote, in her own voice, in her own language, in all 3 of the languages that belonged to her. The English her mother had insisted she learn perfectly. The Korean she had taught herself in a city that never expected her to. The Igbo that was the first language of her bones. She wrote 25 years. She wrote the boardroom in Seoul, where a 38-year-old woman from Enugu placed fabric samples on a conference table and watched a room of Korean executives decide in the first 4 seconds that she was not worth taking seriously. She wrote 20 years of being called a mistress at galas where she was the most accomplished person present. She wrote a pregnancy at 60 that the whole world called impossible. She wrote a boardroom entrance in a deep burgundy Aso oak with 31% of an empire in a leather folder and the most powerful word she had ever spoken. "Shall we begin?" She wrote Su Yeon. She wrote what it meant to extend kindness toward a woman the world expected her to treat as a threat. She wrote Adaeze's 4 words at the dinner table. "Carry me, big sister." And what those 4 words had done to the shape of their family. She wrote the surgical waiting room. She wrote the specific quality of sitting in a corner chair for 4 hours and not leaving. She wrote the things the article could not write because the article had been built from documents and sources and 14 months of carefully assembled evidence. And evidence, however sophisticated, cannot replicate the interior of a life. She wrote all of it. And then, on the evening of the 4th day, she printed the draft and took it to Adaeze's room. Adaeze was sitting on her bed doing homework, 3 open books around her, working in the specific organized chaos of a child who takes school seriously. She looked up when her mother came in. Adaeze sat on the edge of the bed. "I need you to read something," she said, "and I need you to tell me honestly what you think." Adaeze took the printed pages. She read with the same concentrated focus she brought to her own writing, slowly, thoroughly, not skimming. Several times she stopped and looked up at her mother and then went back to the page. When she finished, she held the pages in her lap. She was quiet for a long moment. "Mama," she said. "Yes?" "This is true," she said. "Everything in it is true." "I know," Adaeze said, But is it right? Is it what I should say? Ada looked at the pages again, and then she said, the thing, the one sentence, that changed the ending completely. It's missing one part, Ada said, the part about what you want for the women who come after you. She looked at her mother with those eyes that had been watching everything for 8 years. You wrote what you survived. You wrote what you built. But you didn't write what you want other women to know they're allowed to do. She paused. That's the part they need the most. Adaeze looked at her daughter. 8 years old, built from 2 worlds, choosing both, afraid of neither. You're right, Adaeze said softly. I usually am, Ada said, without arrogance. Just the statement of someone who has noticed a pattern. Adaeze took the pages back. She went back to the table. She wrote the final section. It published on the same day as the article. Simultaneous. Korean, English, and Igbo, posted on the Foundation's platform, the Kang Industries website, and on Adaeze's personal account. The first time she had ever used one, created that morning for this single purpose. The article was 12,000 words. Her response was 4,000. She did not rebut the article point by point. She did not call Park Ji-soo a liar, because Park Ji-soo, to the extent she had been given accurate information by her sources, was not a liar. She had been used, skillfully, deliberately used, by someone who understood that the most effective attack is the one that contains enough truth to seem credible and enough strategic omission to destroy. Adaeze addressed this directly in the opening paragraph. The article published today about me contains facts. It also contains the thing that is more dangerous than lies. It contains true facts assembled in the service of a false story. I've spent 25 years having true things about me assembled in the service of false stories. I have learned that the answer to a false story is not a counter-argument. It is a truer story, told more completely by the person who actually lived it. She wrote about every accusation the article made. The romantic leverage claim, the Mauritius acquisition, the boardroom entrance, the pregnancy announcement. And she addressed each one not by denying it, but by completing it, by providing the interior that the article, built from external documents and hostile sources, could never access. She wrote about what it had cost, not financially, not professionally, personally. The specific, private, daily cost of choosing to stay in a world that kept telling her she didn't belong because she loved a man who was trying, imperfectly, slowly, genuinely, to become someone who deserved her choice. She wrote about Ada, about what it means to raise a child who belongs to 2 countries and has never, for a single day of her life, been confused about which one she is. Both. Always both. Without apology and without the exhausting performance of choosing. And then she wrote the final section, the section Ada had told her was missing. I am not writing this for myself. I stopped needing to defend myself some years ago in a boardroom where I sat down in an empty chair and said, "Shall we begin?" I am writing this for every woman who is reading it from inside a room that was not built for her. I want you to know this. The room was always wrong. Not you, the room. The correct response to a door that will not open is not to wait patiently or knock politely or find a side entrance and be grateful for it. The correct response is to understand, with absolute, unshakable certainty, that you were never meant to need permission. Build the building yourself. Put your name above the gate. Sit in the empty chair. Say, "Shall we begin?" And leave the door open for everyone who comes after you, because they are coming, and they deserve to find a room that is already different, because you were in it before them. Adaeze Okonkwo Kang, Lagos, Seoul, everywhere. The response went live at 9 a.m. By noon, it had been read 4 million times. By evening, it had been translated, unofficially, by readers, into 23 languages. By midnight, Build the Building Yourself was trending in 7 countries simultaneously. Park Ji-soo, the journalist, 29 years old and suddenly in the center of something she had not entirely anticipated, posted a single message on her professional account at 11 p.m. that night. I reached out to Ms. Okonkwo Kong for comment 14 months ago and received no response. Having now read her account in full, I understand I was given an incomplete picture by my sources. I am reviewing my reporting. A full editorial statement will follow. Dong Hyun called Adaeze at midnight. "The magazine is pulling the print run," he said. "The digital version was already live, but they are issuing a correction and a formal editorial apology." A pause. "The editor-in-chief called me an hour ago. He said," and I am quoting directly, "We were used and we did not do our due diligence and we are sorry. He wants to offer you the cover of the next issue." "Tell him no," Adaeze said. A pause. "Ada, I don't need his cover," she said. "I need him to do better journalism. Tell him that." Dong Hyun was quiet for a moment. "You are," he said, "the most extraordinary person I have the privilege of knowing." "You say that every time," she said. "Because it is true every time," he said. She hung up. She looked across the room at the Seoul apartment windows, the city at midnight, indifferent and glittering, building its future in all directions. She had been in this city for 25 years. It had never fully accepted her. It had also, she realized, sitting in this apartment at midnight, 48 hours after the most important thing she had ever written went out to the world, it had also never quite managed to diminish her. She picked up her phone. She called Min Ho. He was awake. He had been awake since the piece went live, she suspected, reading every response, watching the numbers move, unable to do anything from his recovery bed except watch his wife do, from a kitchen table, what he had needed armies to do in boardrooms. "Ada," he said when he answered. His voice was the voice she had loved the longest, the one he only used when there was no one powerful enough to use it against him, open, human, undone. "It's done," she said. "I know," he said. "I've been reading." A pause. "The last section." "Giada told me it was missing," she said. A silence. "She is 8 years old," he said. "I know," Adaeze said. "She is terrifying," he said. "I know that too," Adaeze said. He laughed, the surprised, wrecked, completely genuine laugh that had been hers since a rainy night in Incheon 27 years ago, the laugh of a man who had spent most of his life being too controlled to find things funny and had been entirely undone by a Nigerian woman and a daughter they made together, and a story none of them had planned for. "Come to the hospital," he said. "Please. I don't care that it's midnight. Bring Giada if she's awake." "She's been awake since the piece went live," Adaeze said. "She has been refreshing the view count." "Of course she has," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. She put on her coat. She went to Giada's room. Her daughter was indeed awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed with her tablet, watching a number climb that had no ceiling she could see. "Come on," Adaeze said. "We're going to see Papa." Giada closed the tablet without argument. The only sign that she understood this was not a normal midnight, that some moments are too important for view counts, and collected her small self from the bed and put on her shoes. They went out into the Seoul night together. The city was still and cold and lit by 1,000 windows, each one holding a different life, all of them carrying on in the magnificent indifference of cities that do not know or care what has just happened inside one apartment, on one floor of one building, in the vast, complicated, endlessly continuing story of the world. Giada took her mother's hand. They walked to the car. Minho found out about it on the 3rd week of recovery at the Jeju Villa, when Chisholm accidentally included an architectural drawing in a file she delivered for Adaeze's review. He looked at it for a long time. He called Chisholm. "What is this?" he said. "You should speak to Madame Yoon," Chisholm said. He called his mother. She answered on the 2nd ring. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," she said without preamble. "What is it?" he said. The new wing of the Lagos Foundation building, she said. 6 floors, a residential program for women entrepreneurs from West Africa on the top 2, an exhibition space at ground level, a textile design studio on the 4th floor. A pause. It is being built under my name and with my personal funding. I began planning it 14 months ago. He was quiet. 14 months ago, he said, when you found out about my diagnosis. Yes, she said. Why? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I am 86 years old, she said, and I spent too many of those years making a woman prove herself in rooms I could have simply opened. I cannot give her those years back. Her voice, when it continued, held something he had not heard in 86 years of knowing her. Something stripped of its architecture, its strategy, its performance. Something that was simply true. But I can build something. I have always been better at building than at saying. So I built something. A pause. What is it called? He said. She told him. The Adaeze Okonkwo Center for Women Who Build. The line was very quiet. She doesn't know? He said. No, Madame Yoon said. I want to take her there myself. Just her and me. No ceremony. No room full of people. I want to show her myself and say what should have been said a long time ago, in private, where it can be real. He held the phone for a moment. Mother, he said, formally, permanently. That is the most right thing you have ever decided. A pause. Don't be sentimental, she said. It's unbecoming. But he heard, underneath the iron, something that might have been the sound of a woman who had carried a very heavy thing for a very long time and had just finally been allowed to set it down. The Madame Yoon and Adaeze moment happened on a Saturday morning in Lagos, 6 weeks after the surgery, 2 hours before the foundation gala. Madame Yoon had asked for it specifically, called Chisholm the week before and said, in the direct way she had learned from watching Adaeze, I need 30 minutes with Ada, alone, before the ceremony. They met in a car. Madame Yoon directed the driver to a street in the neighborhood in Lagos that reminded her of Enugu, the neighborhood closest in character to the city of Adaeze's childhood, where the air had the specific quality of somewhere that made you, where her mother had pressed fabric with tired hands and her father had taught school. The car stopped. Adaeze looked out the window. She saw the wrought iron gate. She saw the restored colonial-era buildings, the courtyard garden in full Lagos bloom, the murals on the walls. Young Lagos artists, bright color, women's faces, stories she recognized as stories from women who had come through the foundation. She saw the small businesses in the ground floor units, some of them already open on this Saturday morning, women moving inside them with the purposeful energy of people who have been given something real and intend to use every moment of it. And she saw the nameplate on the gate, the Adaeze Okonkwo Center for Women Who Build. She did not speak for a long time. This is mine, Madame Yoon said from the seat beside her. I built this, with my own money and my own choice, over 14 months while my son was sick and I was sitting in waiting rooms being afraid. Her voice was very even. I built it because I am the woman who spent 20 years closing doors that should have been open. I cannot give you those years back, Adaeze, but I can give you this building and everything it will do for the women who come through it. A pause. And I can say to you, directly, without an audience, without strategy, without any reason other than that it is true and it should have been said long ago, that you are the finest person I have had the privilege of knowing. You are finer than I was. You are finer than I knew how to be. And this family, this improbable, impossible, extraordinary family, exists because you were stubborn enough and strong enough and generous enough to stay in it when I gave you every reason to leave. The street outside held them. Lagos moved around the car, loud and warm and completely itself. Adaeze turned to look at Madame Yoon, at this woman. her adversary for a decade, her cautious ally for 3 years, and something richer and stranger than either of those things for the past 2. This woman who had built her cage out of gold and spent 86 years calling it wisdom, and was sitting here now in a car on a Lagos street with her silver white hair immaculate and her hands folded in her lap and her eyes, for the first time in 25 years of knowing them, entirely undefended. Adaeze reached out. She took Madame Yoon's hand. The old woman looked down at their joined hands, and then, quietly, without sound, the way people weep when they have held something in for longer than the body was designed to hold it, Madame Yoon wept. Adaeze held her hand. She did not say anything. She didn't need to. Some reconciliations are made in words. This one was made in a car on a street in Lagos, with a name above a gate, and 2 women choosing, freely, finally, without fear, to put down everything that had been between them. He had been building it for 14 months. Not a building, not a business acquisition, not a boardroom strategy, a street. In a Lagos neighborhood that reminded Adaeze of Enugu, 1 block from the foundation, on land he had been quietly acquiring through a Nigerian property development company that Chisholm had helped establish, and Suyeon had helped fund, and Jaewon had helped manage, building something that, when it was finished, would be the most personal thing he had ever put his name to. Except his name was not on it. The name on the wrought iron gate at the entrance to the renovated city block. The block with its restored buildings and its courtyard garden and its murals, and its 20 ground floor commercial units all occupied by women from the foundation's entrepreneurship program, was Adaeze Street in 3 languages. Minho had arranged it with the Lagos state government over 14 months of negotiations that he conducted without anyone in the Kong corporate world knowing, because this was not a corporate initiative, and he had not wanted it to become one. He had arranged it with Nigerian architects who understood the Enugu quarter and designed the restoration to honor rather than replace what was already there. He had arranged the murals with young Lagos artists who had submitted proposals through the Foundation's arts program, and whose work, when he reviewed it, was so vivid and so honest that he sat with the portfolio for a full afternoon before selecting. He had arranged it to be ready for the gala weekend. He had not told Adaeze. He had told Giada 6 months ago because Giada had found a planning document in the apartment home office and come to him with it directly and said, "Papa, is this what I think it is?" And he had said yes and sworn her to secrecy, and she had kept that secret for 6 months with the specific vibrating delight of a child holding something wonderful. Chisholm had known. She had managed the Lagos side legal architecture with the same quiet precision she brought to everything. Suyeon had known. She had helped design the textile studio unit on the 3rd floor of the restored building, equipped for exactly the kind of work Adaeze had been doing since she was a girl watching her mother's hands. Madame Yoon had known since the 3rd week of Minho's recovery. She had not told Adaeze. She had simply added it to what she was already carrying. The revelation of the street did not happen at the gala. It happened before. On the Saturday morning, 2 hours before the gala began, when Minho, 8 weeks out of surgery, cleared for travel, walking with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who has been forced to be still for 2 months and has learned in those 2 months something important about the difference between movement and progress, arrived at the Foundation guest villa in Lagos and said to Adaeze, "I need to show you something before tonight, just you and me." She looked at him. She knew, from his face, that whatever he was about to show her was something he had been carrying for a long time. "All right," she said. The car stopped on the street in the Enugu quarter, 30 minutes later. Adaeze looked out the window. She had been on this street earlier that morning with Madame Yoon, and she had seen the building wing and heard the old woman's words and held her hand in the car. But the street, the full block, the wrought iron gate, the restored buildings on both sides, the courtyard garden visible through the arch, the 20 open business units with women already inside them working. This she was seeing for the first time. She read the nameplate above the gate, Adaeze Street, in 3 languages. She sat very still. "I built this for you," Minho said from the seat beside her. "Over the past 14 months, I built it because you have spent 25 years building things in a city that was never yours for a family that did not always deserve you. And I wanted—" He stopped, started again. "I wanted you to have something in the city that made you, something that will be here long after both of us are gone, with your name on it, on a street in the quarter closest to the city where your mother pressed fabric and your father taught school. I wanted the world to have to walk past your name on a street in Lagos and know that you were here, that you built here, that this is yours." The street outside held them. Adaeze looked at the gate. She looked at the businesses, at the women inside them, at the murals on the walls. Faces she recognized, stories she had been part of, lives that the foundation had touched and that had gone on to become their own extraordinary things. She looked at her name, Adaeze Street, the city that had always been hers, the soil that had always known her, the air that still, when she breathed it on certain mornings, smelled exactly like the Enugu of her childhood, like rain and red earth and the specific warmth of the place that made you. She had spent 25 years in Seoul, and Seoul had given her Minho and Adaeze and Suyeon and a boardroom seat with no nameplate that she had sat in and claimed as a fact. But this, a street in a Lagos neighborhood that reminded Adaeze of Enugu, with her name above the gate, this was something else. This was the world saying, you were here, not in spite of everything, because of it. She was quiet for a very long time, and then she turned to Minho, and she looked at him. This man, this infuriating and finally brave and still learning and completely hers man who had knelt on a ballroom floor and read medical textbooks at midnight and built a street in Lagos over 14 months without telling her. And she said the truest thing she had ever said to him. "I have loved you," she said, "in ways that cost me things I will never fully account for. I have loved you through 20 years of being called something I wasn't, and 3 years of learning to be called what I am, and all the years in between that were both harder and more beautiful than anything I ever planned for." She held his gaze. "And I want you to know, I want you to hear it directly, in this car, on this street, with my name above the gate, that none of it was a strategy. None of it was a long game. None of it was anything other than a woman from Enugu who walked into a Seoul boardroom at 38 years old and looked across a conference table and saw, for the first time in her life, someone who looked back at her like she made sense." Minho looked at her. The look he had been looking at her with since a rainy night in Incheon 27 years ago. The compass, pointing north. It would never stop. "Come on," she said. "We have a gala to attend." The gala that evening was the largest the foundation had ever hosted. 800 people, Nigerian and Korean and international. The full extraordinary range of everyone whose life had been touched by the woman standing on the stage in gold aso oke, her own fabric, her mother's colors, the thread of everything she had ever been and built and chosen and survived. Adaeze was in the front row, wearing a small version of the same gold fabric because she had asked 3 weeks ago if she could match her mother, and Adaeze had spent an afternoon in the fabric studio with her daughter, letting her choose the exact thread, the exact trim, the exact gold clasp for her natural coils. Chisholm was in the third row, natural afro luminous under the Lagos gala lights, watching her mother the way she had always watched her, with the expression of someone who has always known the answer and has spent 40 years watching the world slowly catch up. Suyeon was to the left, in a clean-lined cream dress from her own Osaka collection. The collection Adaeze had helped her build. The collection that was, in the textile industry, beginning to be spoken about in the same sentence as the names that mattered. Beside her, the man she loved, Nigerian-British, warm-faced, clearly and completely devoted, learning Korean the way Adaeze had learned it, imperfectly and with total commitment. Minho was in the second row, recovering, still slightly slower than his usual self, but present in the way he had learned over 8 weeks of forced stillness to be present, completely, without the management, without the distance, without the glass wall he had spent 60 years keeping between himself and the full impact of things that mattered. He was looking at Adaeze. He was always looking at Adaeze. Madame Yoon was at the back of the room, standing, not sitting, because she was not, as she had always said, a woman who sat when something important was happening, her silver-white chignon immaculate, her deep jade hanbok chosen with the specific deliberateness of a woman who understands that what you wear into a room is its own form of statement. Her pale, sharp eyes, for the first time in the 25 years that Adaeze had known them, entirely without their armor, just watching, just being in this room, in this city, at this moment, exactly who she had finally decided. At 86, late, but not too late, to be. Adaeze stood at the podium. She looked out at the room. She did not use notes. She had not prepared a speech. She stood at the podium and she spoke the way she wrote, in her own voice, in the language of a woman who has been paying attention for 69 years and has finally, completely, run out of reasons to be anything other than exactly herself. She spoke about what it means to build something from the city you come from, about what it means to carry 2 countries in one body and raise a child who carries 3, and has already decided at 8 years old that belonging to all of them is not a compromise. It is a superpower. She spoke about doors, about the ones that stayed closed for years, about the specific, costly, absolutely necessary choice to keep going anyway, not around the doors, not through the side entrance, but directly through, with your own name above the gate, until the door was not a question anymore. She spoke about the women in this room, the entrepreneurs and architects and designers and builders who had come through the Foundation's programs and were now building their own rooms and leaving their own doors open. She spoke about Adaeze. She said, "My daughter wrote an essay 8 pages long that said my mother is from everywhere. I want to tell her tonight, in front of every person in this room, baby, you are right. I am from everywhere. I am from the city where the air smells like rain and red earth, and I am from the city where the lights never stop, and I am from every room that tried to close to me, and I am from every door I made into a window." She looked directly at her daughter in the front row. "And because I am from everywhere, so are you, and because you are from everywhere, so is everything you will ever build." Adaeze, in the front row in her small gold aso oke, looked back at her mother. Her expression was the expression of a child who is receiving something important and knows it, not performing emotion, not performing anything, just receiving it. Completely. The room rose before Adaeze's final word had fully left her mouth. All 800 people, standing in Lagos for a seamstress's daughter from Enugu who had walked into rooms that were not built for her until the rooms had no choice but to change their shape. Adaeze stood at the podium, and she let it land. She had spent 69 years being strong enough not to need things like this. She was strong enough now to let herself receive them. Afterward, in the garden of the venue, the Lagos night around them, warm and fragrant, the party continuing inside, Giada found her parents at the garden wall. She stood between them. She looked up at Adaeze. "Mama," she said, Did you see the street? I saw it, Adaeze said. And the building? And the building. Giada looked at Minho. Papa built the street. I know, Adaeze said. Halmoni built the building, Giada said. I know that too. I kept both secrets, Giada said, for 6 months, each. You did, Minho said. You were extraordinary. Giada accepted this with the gravity it deserved. Then she looked at her mother. Are you happy? She asked. The question landed in the garden the way Giada's questions always landed. Without architecture, without strategy, with the absolute directness of a child who has decided that the most important things deserve to be asked plainly. Adaeze looked at her daughter, at this child who had come into the world as an impossibility and proceeded to be every single day the most possible thing in it. This child who wrote essays in 3 languages and kept secrets for 6 months and called Su Yan her sister without asking permission and had looked at the world from her first breath in a Seoul hospital room at 3:47 in the morning with the absolute unquestioning expectation that it would be good. She looked at Minho. At this man who had built a street in Lagos over 14 months and read medical textbooks at midnight and knelt on a ballroom floor and had been, across 25 years, both the most maddening and the most completely hers person she had ever known. She looked at Madame Yoon, visible through the garden doorway, standing straight-backed and silver-haired and entirely present in a room she had chosen to be in, not because the room required her, but because she had finally decided that this family, this impossible assembled family, was worth showing up for completely. She looked at Chisholm, at Su Yan, at the people she had chosen and the people who had chosen her, all of them here, in this city, on this night, in the warm Lagos air that smelled like rain and red earth and the specific, irreplaceable warmth of the place that made her. She looked at all of it, and she said the truest thing she had said since a crystal champagne glass shattered in a ballroom and changed everything. Yes, she said, I am. Giada nodded, satisfied with this answer, the way she was satisfied with all true answers, completely, without needing more. She reached up and took both their hands, one of hers in Adaeze's, one of hers in Minho's, the bridge she had always been between 2 worlds and 2 names and 25 years of a love story that nobody expected and that had turned out, against all odds and through more difficulty than it should have required, to be exactly what it always was: real, chosen, irreversible. Come on, Giada said. There's cake inside. I asked Halmoni to save us the big piece, but she has been in there a long time and I don't trust her around cake. Minho laughed. Adaeze laughed. And then, because some things, even after 69 years and 25 years of loving and 3 stories and every impossible beautiful thing the world had thrown at a seamstress's daughter from Enugu, some things are simply, gloriously, unreasonably funny, and joy is not something you ration, and the night was warm and full of music, and the people she loved most in the world were all in the same garden. She walked forward, into the light, into the noise, into the life she had fought for and been given and built with her own hands from the ground up, into Lagos, into home, and that, for a seamstress's daughter who once watched her mother's tired hands and swore she would own the table someday, who had owned the table and the boardroom and the street and the city and the heart of the most feared man in Korean business. That was not just enough. That was everything. That was always, from the very beginning, exactly what it was supposed to be. If you've made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. Not everyone starts a journey and stays until the final page, but you did. You laughed, worried, celebrated, and walked alongside these characters from beginning to end. That makes you one of the special people who truly appreciate a good story. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What was your favorite moment from the entire trilogy? Which character touched your heart the most? And what lesson will stay with you long after this story ends? If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made your day a little better, please take a moment to subscribe and share it with someone who loves powerful stories as much as you do. Your support helps bring more unforgettable stories like this to life. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until the next story, you can take your time to check other stories uploaded here by checking the Players section. Thank you, bestie.